Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're so grateful to have you here today, and we're grateful for your interest in our topic on digging deeper forensic strategies for effective due diligence. We are at the top of the hour, so let's get started. My name is Catherine Bergerson. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and part of the Insightful team. We have a really big group here today. I am actually on the East Coast, and Cannon, our presenter, is on the West Coast, and I see we have people joining us from everywhere in between. So again, thank you for spending part of your day with us. We are at the top of the hour, so let's get started. I want to just share a brief agenda with you. We're going to share a bit about Insightful, then we'll go right into the Digging Deeper presentation. We do have time for questions and answers, and then we'll share some next steps. So, a brief clarification on how to ask questions. Depending on what type of format of GoToWebinar you're using, you'll either see some gray bars on the side of your screen that say questions or chat. Just open that up, type it in, and we'll pause and get to those that we can. The other format may be icons on the side of your screen. And again, just open the chat bubble there, enter your questions, and we will pause and do our best to get to all of them. Wanted to let you know that this session is being recorded, and we will send out a copy to everyone after the presentation today. So let's jump right in to share a little bit of background about Newsbank. We are a leading news. We are an aggregating news company from around the world, bringing teams access to credible, vetted, global news sources, many of which are unique to our company, and they're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from any device. And we're proud to share with you that Newsbank has recently celebrated our 51st anniversary as a company. Insightful is part of Newsbank's philanthropy division, and it's a new software that draws upon the news sources to help nonprofits fill in information gaps, know more about their donors and prospects, so that you can better promote philanthropic engagement. And recently, we're excited to tell you that we've added more than 27,000 obituary and death notices to our collection, and it's growing daily, making Insightful the most comprehensive resource available of its kind. And it's truly this simple. When you know more, you can raise more and deepen donor relationships. So the reason that we are all here today is many of you to learn about our forensic strategies for effective due diligence with Cannon Brook. He is the founder of Brook Solutions, and Cannon has an amazing reputation among fundraisers. Many of you likely know him and his interesting combination of skills. He is a seasoned technical research specialist offering boutique research services, and with that combination of skills, he's able to integrate nonprofit prospect research and data science, and he delivers an illuminating perspective on fundraising and data that enables nonprofit organizations to maximize their potential by helping them successfully raise annual, major, and capital gifts, and also, of course, to learn more about due diligence. He is a proud member of APRA and the Advancement of the Association of Fundraising Professionals. He strictly adheres to the confidentiality and ethics standards in his work. Please join me in welcoming Cannon Brook.
Good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are located. Wow, that was quite the intro. I don't know how I can beat that. Thank you. So yes, my name is Cannon Brook. Those who do not know me, I am the founder of Brook Solutions, and my background is prospect research. I started off actually in Hawaii, University of Hawaii Foundation, Hawaii Pacific Health, and then over at Chapman University, and started consulting on the side, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And now I'm doing my own thing with Brook Solutions, where I marry prospect research, data analytics, and strategy together and provide a holistic view of the donor. So, and now I have a share my screen here. So without further ado, let's see here. Here we go. Can you see my screen? Let's get going here. Can I get a, oh, you can hear me all right? Okay, great. So yes, this is Digging Deeper: Forensic Strategies for Effective Due Diligence. The thinking behind this was there's a lot of great information. Actually, you know what? Let me back up here. First of all, let me just thank Insightful for asking me to come and share this my knowledge on this and get on my soapbox for about, oh, I don't know. I timed this around 40 minutes because I know what it's like to have a webinar that runs right up to the hour and people start dropping off. So it should be short enough to where we should have some questions and answers. But I just want to thank you all for allowing me to add to this body of knowledge. I'm really excited. But this presentation came about that there's a lot of information out there. It's become more fashionable to talk about this, and actually we're having dueling presentations right now. I believe it's APRA Northwest. Don't quote me on that, but there's another due diligence right now. So thank you all that's attended this one and spending your time with us. So I just want to include something that has the lens of a researcher. So let's get going here a little bit. So risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. Mr. Warren Buffett. That is really telling, and I think it's emphasized and illustrates what we're trying to do here. No, this is not a webinar on investing strategies. You could argue maybe, no, we'll get into that, but it does show that how Warren always said that you have to like look into the company. He never got involved with any sort of relationship that be professional, any sort of company investments without really knowing more about it and doing your due diligence. And that's to prevent, excuse me, from being blindsided and getting that pie in the face. So I broke this presentation up into 4 sections to make it manageable. We'll start off with, again, like I mentioned in the beginning, I did want to focus more on actual techniques, and we will get to that, but there are some higher level operations, and that's what is due diligence. Many of you know what it is if you're joining us. Some of you might be new to the industry and just want to find out. Great, welcome. Getting started, how to set up your protocol for your shop. The good news is it's not that hard. You don't have to really spend a whole lot of time into it, in my opinion. There's a lot of great resources out there, but we'll get into that. And then we will get into the levels of research. That is the meat of the discussion. I think they're really excited to talk about. It's where we I break it down into 3 different ways that you can think about doing research, due diligence research. And then we ended up on the resources, some ideas, strategies, and some actionable items for you to walk away with. So this is very exciting. What is due diligence? So the good news is most of you, if you have the prospect research background, you're already doing it. And many of us have been doing this for years, and now we're just paying more attention to it. But due diligence is just looking at it through an ethical lens. So put it another way, prospect research is when you look at a capacity and affinity of a donor, where due diligence is where you're looking at it through the lens of ethics and for reputation protection. You're trying to protect your organization, in other words, right? So that could be looking at the historical background, motivations, whatnot. This is the impact of what happens if you move forward in this relationship with that donor or organization. It doesn't have to just be a person. So as I mentioned before, you're probably already doing this. This was called screening, vetting. We've been doing it for some time usually. We just call it different things, right? It's just really looking at the past of the donor. Let's see here. So why do you want to do that though? So looking at this, this is from a quick Google search, and unfortunately, I'm not trying to blast out any institutions here. It's very depressing, actually. Just a quick search here, and I've come up with all this. No news is not always, bad news is not always good news. There's that saying, like, you don't want to have this kind of reputation damage. This can torpedo your fundraising opportunities and really make your donors think twice about getting involved with you. Unfortunately, there's just too much of this that's been happening. Actually, today I just saw something about what is the Chronicle of Education. They're talking about a donor drunk on power or something like that, and they're like rethinking a gift. So and that just came out recently on LinkedIn. So it's happening a lot lately. So why? So as you can guess, the risk management. You want to mitigate, risk. One example there. There's ethical challenges, and one example I can think of is the Sackler family, right? And as you know, Sackler family, they're the ones who Purdue Pharmacy. Have you seen that? I don't want to say it's a documentary. It's more of like a mini. It's really good though. You want to see that? But it's on the Sackler family and the opioid epidemic that they created. So one example there is there's a university got involved with them. I believe it was a gosh, what was a med school that they named after, right? And so after this whole narcotic epidemic issue that happened, right, they kind of scratched their heads like, do we want to get involved with this? And they ended up pulling the name on that, right? Then we have reputation protection, as we saw in the last slide, unfortunately. There's nothing worse than the pie in the face, and it takes, what is it, 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to destroy it. I would even say in today, in the hyper-connected world that we live in, it can take milliseconds. Once something goes viral, it can really just mess things up for you. You want to make sure before you get involved with anyone that you take all steps necessary to at least do your due diligence there. And then we have regulatory compliance, right? So that's right now when we have like the war in Ukraine, right? We have Russian oligarchs who are on sanctions lists, who are parking yachts, right? They're getting their assets frozen. It's not just an ethical issue. This can have legal ramifications and get you in hot water, especially if they're on a list where you're not supposed to do business with them. And this can also be an adversarial country, an international donor that has connection to an adversarial country. So that's something to look out for. And then we have the dependency risk. This to me is one of the issues that we're just not talking a lot about. So what this means is you have someone that comes in, makes a donation, and then they start putting their thumb down on putting pressure on really trying to change the organization. Think of it as like a board member. You have company boards, right? Sometimes there's activists, board members that come in and they get their votes and they start shaking up things and changing the whole dynamic of the institution. You don't want to have that. Yes, invariably, anyone who throws down a 6 or 7, 8-figure gift, right, they're going to have some sway, but you want to make sure that they don't have that background of putting pressure on the organization, because that can get you into a lot of trouble there. All right, so getting started. So here we're going to talk about getting started, setting up a protocol. Again, the good news is we're all doing this. It's not really hard. You don't have to put a lot of, well, you do have to put some effort into it, but it's not what you think. And I know it can be kind of scary setting up protocol. And these are just some things that I would recommend. They're not all inclusive by any means, but what I would recommend, to my clients. So first, you want to evaluate existing protocols. There is no reason to reinvent the wheel. Many times you have SOPs, you have papers or some sort of documents loosely in your share drive or hard drive. Look at what other executives have said. If there's been a decree from a previous VP or something, to start compiling everything together, because more often than not, I find that there's a lot of information already in your own organization, right? Then you want to create these screening criteria. This is review threshold, sometimes called triggers, whatever you want to call it. These are just anything that's going to put up that red flag, like, oh, wait a minute, we better stop and look more into this. It can be like a typical alert could be, a threshold could be a giving amount, say 25,000, 50, 100, a million, 7, whatever it is. If they're going to have an intimate relationship with your organization, meaning if they're going to be like a trustee or something, right? If it's an international donor, you don't know who this person is. If you're naming a capital campaign, you're going to do like a wing naming or a building, right? You're going to want to look into that. So whatever the criteria is going to be. After that, you want to compile everything and start putting together guidelines, right? This doesn't have to be long-winded. Don't make it some 30-page document. No one's going to read that anyway. And a one-pager that's actually looked at and you have action on is better than some 30-page document that's just hidden away in the dusty bins of your organization. Then you want to gather stakeholders. This one is really ironic because if anyone knows anything about me, I am the anti-meeting advocate. You see me on LinkedIn. I just cannot stand most meetings. I find them to be unproductive. However, this is one example to where you're going to definitely want to have some sort of committee or get together and review the processes and or start vetting these names, right, and have that discussion. And the last thing I would recommend here is educating the gift officers. And now that I'm reading that, I would actually just say anyone who's involved and who has interactions with the donors, especially if they're in a capacity of feeding the pipeline to the director of research, whatnot. But you definitely want to educate them and let them know about some of the criteria that you came up with, right? So getting started. It can be daunting and overwhelming, but the good news is there's so much information out there, everyone. Here's APRA's due diligence toolkit. It's great. There's a link below. I'm sure you've all seen it. If not, go Google it. You can definitely find it. It gives you that roadmap. It can get you started. It's a great resource. I highly recommend it. Also, I would say even in our industry, go on Prospect L, right, our listserv, and just ask people. We are very collaborative. What is that from Finding Nemo? The seagulls. Mine. We don't do that. Okay, we're very collaborative, and most people, 90% of the time, are willing to share at least. Here's an example that I found. I like this because it's a one-pager, or maybe it was two, but I did hide the university because I didn't want to blast them out, but there's a lot of examples you can find, templates you can work off of. I like this because it's short and sweet. It's not overly complex. It doesn't need to be, just because something's complex doesn't make it good or better. So yeah, I thought this was a good example to share. One thing though, I will say, it says right there, prospect development will not pull any legal documents or provide criminal history. I'm not sure about that, if I agree with that. I would actually say that's not doing your job. That's due diligence requires you to look at legal documents and pull criminal history. So otherwise you're not doing due diligence. So that one I would push back on, but it's still a good example either way. So I talked about a couple slides ago how to get going, creating these criteria, red flags. So here's a couple. This is not an all-inclusive list here by any means. Excuse me. So I'm sure if we put our heads together here that we can probably come up with a whole lot more. But so some red flags would be like they proactively contact a joint board or advisory group. One example here, I actually had a client who sent me one funny story. This person said, hey, I'd like to join your board. I'm going to make I think it was a 7-figure gift, a couple $1 million gift. I would like to join right away. They sent me the name. I'm like, is she? I looked into it. It ended up being a 21-year-old. She lived out in Brea. And Brea is a nice town. I'm not bashing the city by any means, but if you have like the wealth that she was talking about, it didn't add up. There was some apartment way off in Brea. And she also told the institution, my client, that she was a techie, a venture capital, all these things that I just couldn't substantiate. I'm like, no. And then we ended up moving on past that. So repeated contacts of multiple staff members, simultaneously, that's kind of a red flag. Any sort of pressing for immediate meetings with top leadership. This reminds me of those 1990s, the Nigerian prince emails we used to get, like the urgency right away, right? Yeah, that should cause you to take some pause and kind of step back there. If they emerge suddenly with no prior connection or affiliation. So I do want to say though, none of these should be a smoking gun. Don't take it as they have one of these like, oh my gosh, they're so sketchy, we need to run for the hills. There's a lot of context, there's a lot of examples of word that didn't mean anything. There's people who just come out of the woodwork. So don't take it that way. This is just some things that I would include that I would want to dig a little bit deeper into. If they're frequently mentioning influential names, so yeah, if they're name dropping, we all humble brag at times, guilty. But if they start saying like, you can start knowing all these people, there's usually some sort of insecurity thing going on back there, and I would definitely want to look into that. A substantial donation right off the bat, that's another one. Yes, we all love getting those, but I've more often than, I wouldn't say more often not, but I've had some instances when that's not the case. I gave an example. An executive with no available background. So yeah, I've noticed when people get really high up on the ladder, and this is very common, they don't have a LinkedIn, that's great, but if there's no LinkedIn, no press release, no mention on the website, no bio, that's where it gets a little sketchy. I'm like, okay, well, we need to check this out some more. So they provide a background story with any inconsistencies or gaps. A WTH moment, you're like, what is that? You're clearly lying. Okay, stop, pause, look into it. This last one here, I think is kind of interesting. If a development officer feels something is off base, like I've had this so many times where you're talking with a fundraiser and you're like, yeah, I just got a bad feeling about this, Ken. It just didn't seem right? Slam on the brakes. This one, more often than not, they are correct, and you definitely want to look into that. That would be like a big one for me. Okay, so now the meat of the discussion, levels of research. So how I approach this is just one way to do it. So the following slides, I don't want you to think that there's no standards or regulated ways to do this. This is just how I would do it. This is not scripture by any means. Many times you're going to have something that blends in the other. There's going to be some overlap. Sometimes one for like a forensic wouldn't do for like a, will do for like a brief bio if you're doing like a brief research. You got to use your best judgment on that. We'll get into that here in a second. So before getting started, I do want to bring this up. It is our job to be neutral as possible and unbiased. I mean, we're all biased. Yeah, I get it, but try to be as neutral as possible. I've run many shops to where you have that analyst who just falls in love with the research, and there's a narrative built around it, and you start getting the ad hominem attacks, which is character assassination, oh, scumbag and all that. Like, no, don't do that. That's not our job, number one. We're supposed to give good information, unbiased, and run up the flagpole and let others make that decision. And they shouldn't be saying that either. I'm not saying that by any means, but be sure it's easy to fall in love with your work and start creating this narrative in your mind. Don't do that. That's not our job. So this part, I added this at the last minute because you're probably wondering, like, what does this have to do with it? So Google, I don't know if you've all noticed, I can't see the comment section. It's been really sucking lately, and this is the only time I'm going to say something bad about, they're not a vendor, but Google. It has really gone downhill, and my concern is that we're going to have to rely on a lot more. And if you're just doing web searching, it doesn't even Google, it can be Bing. I don't know who uses that, but if you use Bing, we're going to do a lot more than that. And also, you can see these screenshots here. So now, well, actually, let me step back here. So with Google, you've noticed the search results have really just been sucking because there's SEO, that's search engine optimization. So that's where companies can just pay their way to get to the top of the rankings, right? And it's like, and then stuff gets buried down. And there's also a way to, what is it called? The right to forget. So now I can go online and start curating my own background and start deleting stuff and requesting it and just get rid of all that information, so you don't really get all that good stuff that you need. But also, and now why we have this here on the screen is, you'll notice that they've had this AI overview. Oh my gosh. And I've done a lot of presentations on AI, ChatGPT. I love it. It's powerful. However, this is scary, and it's scary wrong. So how many rocks shall I eat? At least 1 rock per day. Yikes, if that's coming up on your search results. 1,000 kilometers of tomato. Kilo tomato. I guess that's right. I don't know, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. That, the scary one, I'm a father, the smoking while pregnant. This one's like, oh my gosh, 2 to 3 cigarettes per day during pregnancy. Ouch, Google, you need to work on that search result, especially as an overview. That is scary, so really be careful. And I just want to emphasize, Google is not what it used to be. Okay, so how deep to go? So I broke this up into 3 different layers. So the strategic overview, intermediate analysis, and forensic analysis. You can call this 1, 2, 3, hot, medium, low, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, hot, medium, cold, whatever it is. It's just a way for, I would categorize this, because we can't give everyone the same amount of research. We like to, in a perfect world, everybody would get a forensic analysis, but you know what? We don't have the funding, we don't have the team, the manpower behind that, people power, excuse me. And plus, if you are doing that, you're going to burn out. Your analysts are going to really just get tired out by doing it, because forensic analysis takes a long time, and we'll get into that in a second. So again, so this is strategic overview. Some call it brief bio, a quick search, whatever you want to call it. There's different names to it. So this is just the high level assessment, and how I look at it is, this is when you're doing the groundwork. So you can start off by just kind of scratching around, seeing what's going on, and this will build upon it if you hit any of those red flags that we talked about, or any of those triggers. We're already doing most of this, and this might be for like an annual gift, a mid-level $10,000, whatever that's going to be for your organization. One example would be, say a fundraiser is like, hey, this donor's been giving a lot. We want to see if we want to maybe invite them to get more close with the university or your organization. That would be an example. And total time for these are usually 1 to 2 hours. I say that, and this is from an experienced researcher. Again, best judgment. If you have someone who is brand new, you're going to want to up that a little bit. But the point is not to really go in depth. You just cannot do that. You're churning and burning names. And yeah, so let's look at what that would encompass here. So for a strategic overview, again, the quick one, you're going to want to look at your the background. You're going to want to look at the CRM if they are donor already, or any sort of record, their LinkedIn, search engines. Notice how I make that plural. Do not just use one. Who does that? Who uses Bing too? But anyway, I'm really stuck on Microsoft right now. The giving footprint, looking at the CRM, seeing like what they're giving to, research tools. So here I'm being very agnostic. We all know what the vendors are that we use in our research tools. I'm really trying to not call any. No, I want to be as neutral as possible, but we know what they are. Look at the network, LinkedIn, go to the board, see if there's any board membership, and then immediately start doing this like quick search engine media search and see if anything comes up in the news recently. Okay, intermediate analysis. This is more, I think this is a perfect blend of a forensic, which is going to just take forever and ever and really tire you out, and or the preliminary research one, right? So For intermediate analysis, this might be going off from the previous research, strategic overview, excuse me, and then start going on to this if you hit those certain criteria. You're building upon the research. You're looking for those certain red flags, and maybe it's a $25,000 gift you would do this, 50, 100, whatever the criteria is going to be, right? I think this is a nice balance. Total time for this is 5-7 hours, I would say, for an experienced researcher. Again, if you have someone new, probably longer. It all depends. But let's look at what that would take here. So you'll notice how I'm just building upon from the previous slide. We're just going to focus on the bolded ones because that's where I keep adding on to it. And another reminder, again, this is not scripture. When you take these slides, please take the slides and do what you want with them. Maybe you're going to switch these around, do what you need, but best judgment there. This is just what I would recommend for most cases. There's also going to be times when you're going to have to go straight to forensics. So anyway, contact reports. You look at contact reports, that is a gold mine. That's going to have so much information in there. Criminal background. So yeah, we all know LexisNexis, you scroll down the bottom, you see it there. If anything pops up, great. That would be an area that I would look at. Disciplinary search. Look at the bar, look at the medical, right? If they're a nurse, if there's any sort of disciplinary action against them, you want to take a look at. The sex offender registry, there is a couple of databases. There's a federal one and you can look at. So this one, I went back and forth. It could be on intermediate analysis appropriate or maybe forensic. Again, if you're working for a children's hospital, this would be probably the forefront. I would move this up. So again, you gotta have to use your best judgment on this. But I would say intermediate analysis would be fine. So giving footprint. Look at if they're an event sponsor. This is a great way also to see what their passions are, kind of like what they're into, what they're, yeah, which way they lean almost. SEC search. It's not just looking at their stocks. I think it's 8K to where they have to, there's disciplinary stuff you can find in SEC searching. I believe it's the 8K is one of them. If there's like a recent event that happened, they have to notify you. Galas, if they attended any galas, it gets you an idea of what their passions are and kind of like what their interests are. Same with patronage. I've had a recent client to where I was looking into one that was funding I believe it was an artist, right? And some may fund like activists openly. So it gives you an idea of where they stand. 990 search, that is another one. Obviously, if they're attached to a foundation, you're going to see what that foundation gives and what their interest and what their giving has been. So looking at the network of that potential donor for intermediate analysis, look at conferences, if they've attended any conferences. If they have any professional associations, usually you'll find that on the bottom of LinkedIn. Excuse me, I have to take a drink there. And social media. So this one's kind of interesting. I still come across a lot of people who say you can't use social media. I totally disagree with that. Now, you can't start adding people on Facebook to be their friend just to research them. No, that's unethical. But if they have an open account or open Facebook, that's free range. There's so much information on there. I mean, there's a reason why if you look at congressional hearings, anyone has time to watch C-SPAN. No one. They dig into people's Twitter because what they said, which is really interesting. So it's funny because people post the strangest stuff online. They think that we're not going to see that. It's bizarre. But anyway, so media. You want to look at blogs, any sort of industry newsletter, media research tools. So yeah, would be the vendors that aggregate any sort of media because again, as we talked about with a couple slides ago and showing you the example from Google, like you can't just trust search engines anymore. The people are buying their way, they're curating, they're deleting. So you got to have other means. So I definitely recommend that. Negative news search, that's a great tool. LexisNexis, I know, has that. I haven't used it that much. If anyone in the comment section wants to let us all know how that goes, I would love to hear that. I've used it a few times in the past, but we'll talk about that later too. There's other things you can do. Podcasts and webinars. Oh my gosh, podcasts. So I do this all the time where you find a podcast or a webinar, some sort of like video online, you go listen to that when you're doing the research. People have there's just so much little nuggets that you can use to continue your research. It's a great resource. I highly recommend it. Always listen to the whole thing. There's a lot of slip ups that people make and you'll find it like, oh, I didn't know that. You'll start adding it. So press releases as well. So if there's a company press release, you want to go check that out. Okay, forensic analysis. So this is the deep analysis, the one that you're going to really go into. This is the exception, not the rule. So if you have fundraisers, and this also goes back to the whole training, if you have fundraisers who are requesting this all the time, no, this is not the point of this. These are the one-offs. honestly, when I was working for higher ed, even healthcare, I maybe did 1 or 2 a year. There's not a whole lot because these take a lot of time. That is the point. So as we've been talking about, you're going to have to use advanced techniques. Googling is not going to work. You're not going to find everything. You're going to want to include your criminal background check and verification of credentials. We'll talk more about that in a second here. And again, these are for high-end or high-risk, profiles, people. So like maybe as a trustee, maybe it's someone who has that intimate, going to have that really intimate relationship with your organization. Are you naming a wing? Is it a capital campaign gift? Something that's going to draw a lot of attention that you're going to need this. It's going to be a big commitment, and you want to make sure you do your research before getting involved. Total time depends. That is such a consultant thing to say. I know, I apologize. It really does. From my experience, I mean, I've done some I've conducted forensic research. It's taken a week or two. It really all depends on what the budget's going to be, what the risk factor is. Is there going to be a high risk of blowback effect if you get involved, and really what the funding is going to be, right? Because these are expensive. Take your hourly, divide by 4, take your hourly salary, figure out what your hourly wage is, and you can start calculating what it costs to make these reports, and it's $5,000–6,000, right? These are not cheap reports, so it all depends. So for a forensic analysis, you're going to want to look at credentials. Especially those who are in the higher education, go to the registrar and check in and say, hey, did they actually graduate? I had this so many times working for universities where it's really weird, where people would flat out lie or they studied there. They took one class and they claim that they graduated. No, it's not illegal. It doesn't mean that they're a nasty person. So, but it is kind of like makes you want to scratch your head, like, huh? And something you should definitely let your executives know about. An email audit. So this is tricky to do. Think of yourself as an attorney and you're doing the discovery process. So you're going to want to, if the donor has a relationship, you're going to pull all the communications internally. Some people are not going to like that. You're going to have to get special permission for this, but there's a lot of information from those emails you can find. And again, this is for a forensic analysis. You're not going to do this for everything, but there's a lot of stuff that's telling that you want to check your bases on. Field research. So yeah, this is anecdotal research. You're talking with fundraisers, parents, volunteers, whatnot. But I've had so many times where they'll come to me and like, hey, Ken, so I met with such and such donor, and stay away. Like, what do you mean? They'll tell a story like, oh my gosh, so sketchy. No, when we make our report, we can't say that, but it's good information to know what people have these firsthand experience. So you definitely want to check that out. Legal. This is different than criminal background. So this is looking for any sort of liens against them, bankruptcies. And you're gonna have to go county by county and start looking at their court records, because I know it's like LexisNexis, for example, doesn't pull up everything. There's things that I find and they're like, wonder why that got left out. Then you have skip tracing. Then that's at the end. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but that is going through and finding where people, their whereabouts, where they used to live, and that's going to really help your research techniques. We'll talk about that. Your SDN, that is a mouthful. I can never say it, but that's your sanctions list. I think I briefly mentioned. So that's going to check and see if they're on a foreign U.S. sanctions list. You want to check on that, make sure, especially if they're a foreign donor. So for getting footprints, DAF research, there is a service out there that checks for DAFs, but they're really hard to find, but it's due diligence research. You got to check your bases, see if they're involved in any DAFs and donor profiles. So many times if they've made a 7-8 figure gift, they've probably done it somewhere else and another institution wrote a blurb or had some sort of profile on them. This is a gold mine. You want to always pull that up. You'll notice political contributions. That's another one that I'm just ruffling feathers on. So I disagree with that one, that it's unethical to use. That is public information, and yeah, you're going to include that. So example, so if I have a client that has for example, a gay rights advocate or something like that, right? And there's a donor came in and made a donation of a Proposition 8. And those who don't know, that's the California proposition that bans same-sex marriage. You're going to want to let them know about that. I'm not going to hide behind like, we can't dig that up, and that's political information, we can't use that. So I completely disagree with that. That's another webinar I definitely will debate on, but political contributions. And let's look at the network here. So see if they're a membership to anything, PETA, NRA, anything like that. It can kind of give you which way they lean, help build that whole profile of the person. And then you want to do a social media sentiment analysis. So admittedly, this is harder if you don't have the skill set. So if you do know R or Python, there's great scripts that you can use that will pull the Twitters and see what they're, no, wait, it's not Twitter, it's X. Pull the X's, like what, you can't say tweets. You know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, so you pull that information, do a sentiment analysis, see what they're talking about. Is it positive, negative, anything offensive in there? So, and there's also some vendors that will do it for a fee. I haven't tried any of those out because I can do that myself, but if anyone has, in the comments section, please let us know here. Media, so any sort of content created. Do they have a personal website? Is there anything like that out there? Publications, kind of similar. If they have white papers, LinkedIn articles, any sort of articles out there, you want to check those out. And then YouTube. YouTube is really kind of interesting because many times I find a lot of good stuff that people's profiles that they're posting, they're sharing, that they have on there, that they created. It gives you this, again, that whole holistic view of your donor when you're doing your research, and kind of, it just helps fill in the cracks. One of these by themselves is never going to be enough. Again, you're just trying to build the whole picture. It's a puzzle that you're putting together. It's another way to think of that. Okay, so actionable techniques. So here we have some ideas and some strategies and some things to help you to walk away from this presentation. I would make some suggestions here on doing. The first one is Boolean search. So yeah, if you're not already doing this, you gotta be doing this, you guys. Especially as I've been hounding, I've been picking on poor victim of Google, but you really have to be using your Boolean search. Here's some examples. You want to use the operators and, or, and not. So for example, have your donor name and the controversy. If something comes up, and all this does is it starts bubbling up the things that are on page 50 of the search and makes them up, moves them up closer to you, right? So you don't have to keep going back and back and back. It just speeds up your research. You save hours, learn it. You can use the wildcard, which is that little asterisk. Do the quotes, which is the hard, like only searching this topic. So learn all that is so easy. So the and will include both terms. The or will include both terms, one or both. So you can say the donor name or the controversy, and then you start attaching and stringing onto it the city, the place of employment. That makes it a lot more powerful, and it just speeds up your research. The not. This is one I use a lot. It can be the -2 in Google. So when I'm doing my searches, so for example, if there's someone, I lived in Orange County previously before Northwest here, back home. So in Orange County, there's a lot of people, they just flooded the searches like with all their Orange County stuff. And it's like, okay, no, I want to see like, if they, for example, one donor lived in Arizona prior. So I do -Orange County just to get rid of that and clean up your search. One way to do that, and you can start finding information a lot easier. Okay, skip tracing. So skip tracing is what we talked about. It's used by private investigators. It's a way to find someone who skipped out on a payment. I don't know what to call it. It's the same concept, so I'm keeping skip tracing, but why are we talking about this? This is a lifesaver because of how search engines work in the indexing. It's the pages that are most likely linked to and cited that are going to come up first. So these weird, esoteric, no-name, like old websites from back in the day are going to be way, way far back. I've noticed if you start going back and finding all the different cities. So for example, I used to live in Orange County. You can say Cannon Brook plus Orange County. It'll start bringing up more stuff. And if you want to go back any further, excuse me, you can say like Cannon Brook, Honolulu, where I used to live and work. So you can say that, and all that stuff will come up, and it will save you from just going deep, deep, deep into Google, and it speeds up your research process. And there's so much stuff that you find. It's like, again, there's this weird listservs and stuff like that that I just start digging up by doing this. It's such a great technique. Adverse media. So yeah, this is really big. It's a fancy way for saying negative news, essentially, right? So why you want to do this? This is going to be the bulk of your due diligence research. There's operators, or not operators. There's some words that we'll get to here in a second, but it's where you're looking for any sort of things that are coming up. It could be lawsuits or anything like that. You definitely want to include this. And when doing your research, your adverse media research, there's suggested search terms, and this comes from the due diligence toolkit here. So you have scandal, court case. I'm not going to read them all. Do you plaintiff, liability, guilt, right? We can put our heads together and probably come up with a lot more, but I thought this was a great starting point. How do you include this? So you could string all these together. I don't think you'd want to do that because it's going to get really, really messy and take, I don't know about the search quality on that. So what I would do is, you're going to hate me for this, one by one, do that. But that's the point of a due diligence. It takes time. This is not easy. That is not the point. But there is also another way. There are some services like the free adverse media check. That's a service where I believe I've used this before. I didn't put the link on here, but I mean, you guys can just look it up and you can find it really quickly. It's one of the top 2 links there. But it does kind of the same thing where it includes many of those search terms that we had in the last slide to show you that will bring them forward. There's a warning though, this one is free, but they also try to sell you their services, so keep that in mind. But it's a free service. I definitely would try it. I recommend that. Why not? If you're going to do your due diligence, you might as well just try to do every avenue, because as you know, there's times where there's like that one little nugget was found by doing this extra little step. So definitely recommend that. Transcripts. So by transcripts, I don't mean your college transcripts. What I mean here is if they've been interviewed. So if you have somebody that's a well-known donor, high roller, right, very well-known. CNN, for example, has their transcripts. You can go through there and see like old interviews, what they've been on, and see what was said. But this also has the benefit of you can piggyback this onto the sentiment analysis. You can take a look at it and you can scrape in all their old interviews and see like what they were saying, what the sentiment is. So that would be another way you could do that. That's kind of cool. Vanderbilt also has this news archive where you can find transcripts as well as also old news articles, whatnot. So it's a great resource. Definitely, I would check that out as well. Let's see here. And the last one is the offshore leak. So if you remember about 10 years ago, they had the Panama Papers. Those were offshore accounts that were made available to the public. The International Consortium of Investigative Journalists has a database where you can check it. It does all the Panama, the Paradise Papers. These are all names of people that have had offshore accounts, and a lot of them have been prosecuted due to this leak, whatnot. So this is part of the public domain. Some of you, is it ethical to use? Well, the New York Times use it. Department of Justice were prosecuting people off this information. So yeah, this has become the public domain now. It's been almost 10 years. I don't see an issue with that, but you do have to be careful. Again, just because someone has an offshore account does not mean that they're sketchy, okay? There are legitimate reasons for that. So again, be careful how you present this, but it is one area that you can look at as well. So, and on that though, and that about wraps it up for me. We are about 42 minutes, so. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Wow, that's a ton of great information. Thank you. Oh, wow. Okay, let's see if we have any questions. We do, and there, let's see. Well, one I think that we probably covered is what sources do you recommend in for more of the legal documents and criminal records? If we could just cover that again quickly.
Yeah, I don't want to. Again, I'm trying to be neutral. LexisNexis is the standard. They charge you a ton for it, but they understand they have a lot of good information. But you can also find the FindLaw. A lot of the briefings will come up. There's kind of like the data brokers where they have like your address, like what is it called? Was it Ben Verified or something like that, right? Where they show you like a little, they get you to click in there, they show you like a little address, like, hey, join our service, and we can do that. However, there's ones that do that for legal briefings, so you can at least see what the case is, and you can take that and go to the Google search and start reverse searching and trying to find that on your own. And many times you can find a published version of that, so you don't have to go and pay money. So that's one way you can do that. But yeah, LexisNexis seems to be the main source, though, that I know of.
Wonderful, thank you. A question about what resources do you like using to screen international constituents?
Yeah, because vendors that GDPA, right? There's all that stuff that we just don't have the data. That international, they don't give out the information like we do in the United States, and you're really limited. You're gonna hate me for this. There's really no easy way to screen international donors. It is hard work. It is old-fashioned research. I am not aware of, and please, anyone in the little comment section there, say if you know something. There's not. iWave, they claim to have. You can search different countries, but it's nothing because they're not legally allowed to have a lot of information. So you're going to have to do just a lot of manual research, a lot of translations. I just had another client of mine where I was doing one in Colombia, and I had to do a lot of translating, and that was a pain. But it's out there. It just takes a lot of time. So I wish there was an easy button for that one.
Thank you. Thank you. Any best practices for thresholds of when you would provide the intermediate analysis?
Best practice, yeah. Anytime that the relationship is moving forward with a potential donor and they're going to get more involved in the university or your organization, you can see that I have a university background. Anytime they're going to get more involved with your organization would be one I would say definitely for sure. And that doesn't have to be just a board. It could be an advisory group. It can be a parent group. If they're going to have that interaction, right? That might be a threshold. I would say from my clients, what I've seen out there is $50,000 is kind of like the starting point for that, but it all depends. The smaller organizations, it might be 5,000. It just depends on what your revenue and what your gift status is. So,
thank you, thank you. Should we be concerned about donor privacy in using a free adverse media search that's hosted by a for-profit company?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. That's why I check it out. If you're uncomfortable with that, I'd say don't. It's out there. It's just, to me though, that is no worse than typing into another for-profit, which is Google. They are aggregating all of our information and creating, and if you think not, that they're in it to make money, and so it is no worse than using Google, I would argue. So if you're against using Google or any web searching, okay.
Great point. Great point. And we sort of think Google's free, but of course it's
interesting. Yeah, and as I said, like ethics, I'm a very ethical person. I don't want to seem like, oh, well, we can skirt by that. It's a gray area, but I'm not going to hide behind ethics on that because there's points like exactly. If you're using Google, then okay. Well, so to me, it doesn't make a difference. So anyway, good question though. I like it.
Great questions. And we have two really good information points to share. Thank you about due diligence discussions with UK donor researchers, and a lot of people use Excapian.com for due diligence. I can add that in our follow-up email, and also a recommendation for Helen Brown Group resources. There was a there that we can share those too. If you'd like. Absolutely. Are there any other questions? I'm going to look one more time. I believe that, this is perfect timing. We are coming up on the top of the hour. Cannon, wow, what fantastic information. We certainly appreciate your time and your investment in bringing this information to people. I know there were some other comments about, are the slides available? They are. There should be a little handout section. You can download them there. You can then they'll have all of our contact information and things like that. So again, Cannon, thank you. We appreciate you. Thank you for being part of the Insightful webinar series. And for our next steps, if you haven't heard, Insightful sponsors a podcast, No More, Raise More. It is the podcast for fundraising professionals, and it's conversations between donors and major gift officers, challenges that they've overcome, ways they've collaborated, how they've found information, how they've turned things around. So there's a lot of interesting information there. And speaking of podcasts, yes, you could probably learn from about some of the donors from their own mouths. Absolutely. So again, thank you for sharing part of your day with us. Our contact information is on the screen. It's also in the slides. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. On behalf of the Insightful team and Brooks Solutions, we thank you for sharing part of your day with us. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. It was fun.
Thank you.